Hello, and welcome to the Corner Culture. My name's Kalen. It's your boy Kalen, owner, operator, and host of Corner Culture. This is episode number 2. Did my first one yesterday. If you watched it, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you watch me, some random anonymous dude you don't know, online talking about a bunch of crap he doesn't have, for which he has no expertise? Why would you do that? Well, anyway, if you are, shame on you, but also welcome and thanks for watching. Appreciate you. All right, so my topic today is Sweden. I have an interesting history with Sweden, and I've been there once. Well, technically twice, but once really, where I spent the whole day there. I stayed the night there, in Stockholm. I was in another city in Sweden for like a half day. I was on a cruise ship. I worked on a cruise ship playing drums in a jazz trio, and but when I went to music school before I went to Sweden, I befriended a small group of Swedes that were at the school studying music along with me. One of which was in my class playing drums as well. His friend, who traveled to the U.S., to Pasadena, California, from Sweden with him, was in the guitar program. And then they had another friend that they knew that joined 1 quarter after us that was in the drum program. So he was a drummer, but he wasn't in our program. Anyway, it was a small group of Swedes. I got to know them really well. I tried learning the language, extremely difficult language. I learned about their culture. But before meeting them, I had this idea of what Sweden was because at the time I was a progressive leftist, lefty liberal Democrat that believed that we just got to spend our way out of everything, out of every problem that there is, and that we need welfare programs, and we need unemployment programs, just out the wazoo, and we need free healthcare like Sweden has. But upon actually talking to them, and I learned a lot about Sweden that I didn't expect. Like, number one, they have this really big problem with rape that I learned about. So that kind of stunned me. That was the first thing I remember learning about, going, wait a minute. Sweden, this socialist, liberal, progressive paradise, has a problem with rape? What? And then I learned, yeah, and on top of that, they got a problem with alcohol. Like, alcohol's a big problem there, especially in the rural parts, up more northern areas where it's like, sunny 3 months out of the year. Uh, yeah, the people get depressed and drink a lot, and then they do dumb shit like fucking rape people. So there was that. And then when I sort of started transitioning out of the left, thanks to COVID, and realized that the whole thing was just a big lie, that is the left, the liberal stuff, um, I stumbled upon some things about Sweden, and it really hit home to me because it was like, well, I happen to know something about Sweden. And oh, and by the way, these friends of mine in the music school, the patriarch, the father of their little tribe, would come to LA every 6 months and visit and hang out with us and take us out to eat. And I got to know him really well. Great guy, just, and a killer musician too. Um, and so speaking to him, he's much more experienced. He's an adult. I think he was in his 50s at the time. And he owned a business. He was a business owner in Sweden. Okay, not just a life, a citizen and resident, and born and raised pure blood Swede. He was also a business owner, and I learned a lot talking to him, hearing about what it's like running a business in Sweden compared to the United States. And he flat out said, he was like, I would never be able to run a business in the United States. My business would never survive in the United States. Would not make it. And I always thought at first he was saying because we didn't have enough like welfare and handout programs. But what he was actually saying was, no, it's the other way around. And here's why. So I want to share these things with you. I'm not gonna watch the whole things, but I do want to share them with you at least to some degree and chat about a little bit about them. So check it out.
What do most Americans think about when they think of Sweden? Music, the Muppets? Maybe.
But I'd put my money on something else. The iconic Swedish model.
Whenever they profile the Swedes, they always seem to be so happy and beautiful.
But there's another Swedish model that's almost as admired. The Swedish economic model.
Compared to most other nations, Sweden is a success story.
What? The Swedish economic model? What is that?
But why is Sweden successful?
Many credit Sweden's generous welfare state and progressive policies with creating a standard of living that is among the best in the world.
Can the rest of the world learn from Sweden?
If you're willing to, yes.
Many think we should be more like them.
If an American would tell me that, the U.S. should be more like Sweden, I would say I don't think it's possible.
Dr. Charlotta Stern is a sociologist at Stockholm.
My Swedish friend, the older gentleman, the patriarch I mentioned earlier, he said the exact same thing. He said the exact same thing, that the United States would never be able to do the same thing that Sweden does because it's too big, 330 plus million people, and it's too diverse. It's not as homogenous as Sweden. He said it himself. And by the way, this is not a conservative man that I'm talking about. This is not a racist, sexist, conservative man. He's just pointing out the facts from his perspective as a Swede, a full blood Swede. There's too much diversity, and there's too much hetero. I don't know the word. Anyway, too much diversity and just too many damn people to ever do what Sweden is doing.
Stockholm University.
The U.S. is a very diverse society, whereas Sweden is, or at least has been up to modern times, very homogeneous. People have looked the same, had the same religion.
Heterogeneous, that's the word I was looking for.
They speak the same language.
And good luck trying to learn the language.
This is my first tunbre.
It's spoken only by the 9 million people of Sweden, a tiny group compared to the U.S. population of 300 million. And Swedes typically don't move far from the towns where they grew up. It's a cozy little country that might be thought of as a close-knit club.
Well, Club Sweden, I think, can be described as sort of very similar to what goes on in small towns, where you don't necessarily recognize every single person you meet on the street, but where it takes a very short time to establish common grounds.
It makes for a friendlier government, something Stern has experienced firsthand.
I lived up on a big hill, and I walked down to the subway every day, and I could never find a mailbox.
So she sent an email asking public officials to install a mailbox in a more convenient location. And guess what? They did. A postal worker even invited her to the grand opening.
Can you imagine that happening in the United States? You call the post office and you say, "Hey, I need a box right here because for whatever reason, I need to get from point A to point B, and and there's just no mailbox there on my regular route, and it would be super convenient for me, one person, to have a mailbox right there." Can you imagine that happening in the United States? I couldn't even get mail delivered on time during the slow season with the United States Post Office.
And she asked me if I could actually come and cut the ribbon.
Don't bet on getting that kind of service from the U.S. Postal Service.
Never would happen.
American bureaucracies just don't inspire much trust.
It's the high trust that Swedes have in each other that makes it possible to build an extensive welfare state.
America could pass laws that mimic Sweden's welfare state policies, but it's tough to replicate a culture that allows those policies to work about as smoothly as possible.
It's about culture. Thomas Sowell talks about this a lot. Another thing that really opened my eyes is, and this is something I'd never heard talked about on the left, is the importance and the value of culture and how much that has an impact of politics. Like the there's the saying that I think they say politics is downstream from culture. And yeah, I think that's true. Or they might say it the other way around, but I think the correct way is politics is downstream from culture. Culture is so important, man. And the left just dismisses this whenever anybody brings it up about Sweden, like they are culturally homogenous. Of course, certain things are going to be possible in that sort of an environment compared to the United States, where it's just not. And by the way, the same thing is true in Japan. My wife is Japanese, another language I tried to learn. I learned a little bit. I can actually read it fairly well, or at least a third of the alphabet, the hiragana, I can actually read. I don't know what I'm saying, but I can read it like a kindergartner. And I've obviously speaking with my wife about Japan for years now. It's the same thing over there. A lot more people, 127, 128 million people, somewhere in that ballpark, but it's the same thing. They are culturally homogenous, and they protect that culture. Immigration over there is extremely difficult. They're loosening. It appears that they are loosening up some of the immigration laws now because for economic reasons, but up until recently, it was nigh impossible to immigrate there without a bachelor's degree, without a job, without a language test proving that you can speak, read, and understand the language very, very well. So again, culture so important.
But America could emulate some of the Swedish policies that don't require extensive bureaucracies. Every morning, Stern helps her daughter Rebecca get ready for school.
Okay, I don't know if I need to relate to that.
Very much. Reading.
Schoolyard romances. Private school.
You now have a choice to sort of seek out a school that you feel is the right one for your kid.
Wait, what did she say there? You have a choice? You have the right to choose the school? What on earth
romances.
Is that?
My boyfriend.
But there's a big difference. Rebecca uses a voucher to attend a private school.
You now have a choice to sort of seek out a school that you feel is the right one for your kid.
A voucher program? Isn't that racist? Isn't that discriminatory? Aren't voucher systems like from the devil incarnate? Yet Sweden does this. Sweden has a voucher system when it comes to education for the young.
U.S. teachers' unions regard vouchers as free market radicalism, but families in progressive Sweden enjoy universal school choice. It's one of the many things that would surprise outsiders, says economist Dr. Andreas Berg.
It surprised the hell out of me when I learned that Sweden had school choice. You had to you could choose. My Swedish friends that I was referring to earlier, they all went to private school. And what blew my mind is that in the high school equivalent era of their education, their primary education, they went to specifically a music school. Like that for me as a musician growing up when I was a kid in high school, I just went to band class. I just went to one class a day that was music. But to go to a school specifically for students interested in arts and music at the high school level?
People feel that Sweden grew rich because of social democracy or labor unions, but that's not the reason Sweden grew rich. Sweden grew rich like any country that is rich, through well-functioning capitalist institutions.
Well-functioning, that's the key word there, the key phrase. That's the qualifier. Well-functioning free market enterprises.
Work, trade, innovation.
That, says Berg, is what transformed the poverty-stricken Sweden of the late 19th century into one of the world's richest nations by the time a certain foursome started singing. But then Sweden changed course and adopted the progressive policies that made it famous. However, after years of economic sluggishness, Sweden altered its direction again in the 1990s, adopting many free market reforms, from school choice to deregulation.
So this is something that they just kind of glossed over it there. But if you watch this full documentary, I think that's also done by Reason TV. It's like a full hour and a half, 2-hour documentary where they talk about that period where Sweden went from being kind of free market, and then they kind of toyed with socialism. They didn't go full-blown socialism, but they did have a lot of expropriation of certain things. I don't know if it was. I don't know the details if it was like specifically businesses outright or industries outright. But they socialized a ton of stuff, and then it sucked. It absolutely started to fail, like it always does. It crumbled and fell apart. But because they are culturally homogenous, because they're a smaller country, they were capable of having the conversation at a national level and leveling with everybody and saying, look, this clearly isn't working. And everybody went, yeah, you know what? You're right. Even the people who did it, they were like, this isn't working clearly. And so that's how they were able to get the reforms to get out of it, to go back into the free market end of the spectrum, and then explode economically and rank so well as they do, which I'll show later.
There have been deregulations of basically everything from taxi, air services, railroads, electricity, telecommunications. The most important thing is that you lowered the top marginal tax rates that used to be around 80%. It's still a high tax level, but it's no longer very progressive. And that's a big change.
Although much of the 70s era welfare state remains, Berg credits the free market reforms with turning the economy around.
Sweden is moving in the market economic direction, but that does not mean that the United States should be moving in the socialist direction.
I chunked aside some of my free market principles.
Sweden's debt has been shrinking in recent decades, but not so for ours. It keeps growing and growing.
Health insurance.
That's funny. Let's look at that again, because we all know what happens now that it's 2020.
In decades,
This only
but
goes
not
to
so for
2010.
ours. It keeps growing and growing.
That's only to 2010. There's another 13 years on top of that where we
Health insurance reform became the law of the land.
And we emulate Sweden's welfare state programs, even though they'll likely flounder in a giant population where bureaucracies don't engender trust.
You can't just build up this whole Club Sweden experience in a culture that is so different from the Swedish culture.
So what will
Yeah, that's true. We're almost at the end of this video, so I think I'm going to move on to the next one. So yeah, anyway, culture is downstream, and we can't just hop on the Club Sweden boat. I'm fully on board with that, and I fully understand why she's saying that. Now, check this shit out.
Today, many Americans don't like capitalism. Socialism would be better, they say. Not repressive Russian or Venezuelan socialism, but democratic socialism, like what's practiced in Scandinavia.
I think we should look to countries like Denmark, like Sweden.
So again, I was a full-blown Bernie bro from 2016 through 2019, and in fact I even watched and listened to the Young Turks religiously. I was in this. I was fully into this, and I believe that Sweden was like the obvious thing that we needed to all get to, and it was just unquestionable. And I thought it was all driven by socialism.
Want to be like Sweden? Kinda. Sounds pretty good.
People interviewed in this just-released PBS documentary say America should be more like Sweden.
It seems like it's that complete.
Come on. Trying to eliminate the video jitters here. And now it's maybe okay, there we go. Maybe that was going up. Let's go. Come on. Play that shit. Alrighty. My computer might be kind of maxing out here. Yeah, it looks like it is.
Sweden.
It seems like it's like a place that like no problems or something.
It is a socialist economy.
Volvos and socialized medicine.
Volvo is now a Chinese company.
Oops. China.
Welcome to Stockholm, Sweden. My name is Johan Norberg, and this is where I was born and raised.
Johan Norberg made this documentary because he wanted to set the record straight.
Earlier. This documentary is about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours long, and it goes into much greater detail than the previous video regarding just the whole everything. If you can find this, Sweden Lessons for America, I highly encourage you to watch it at length.
Sweden is not socialist because the government doesn't own the means of production. To see that, you have to go to Venezuela or to Cuba or North Korea. But we did have a period in the 1970s and 1980s when we had something that resembled socialism, a big government that taxed and spent heavily. And that's the period in Swedish history when our economy was going south.
So much so that even socialists complained about the high taxes.
Astrid Lindgren, who wrote the very popular children's books, Pippi Longstocking.
Even the friggin' socialists were complaining about the taxes.
For instance, she was a social democrat, but she had made a lot of money from her books. She found that she paid 102% in taxes.
She wrote this angry essay about a witch who was quite mean and vicious, but not at all as vicious as the Swedish tax authorities.
Love it. Okay. So anyway, so here's some videos. But now let's get into some data. So here's the 2023 index, free market index. Okay. It's now called the Index of Economic Freedom. Last time I looked at it, it was called the Free Market Index. So anyway, top 10 countries, they do this every year. I've been following this for the last couple of years, and I hadn't looked at 2023 until today. And so I was a little surprised at the results because from memory, what I remember in like 2021 and 2020 and 2019 is that Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, all the Scandinavian countries always ranked in the top 10. Like they were always in the top 10. And the United States was always below number 20, was always at best was 20, but sometimes was like 25. And so I remember that was another thing that like really blew my mind when I learned that even according to the free market index, the global free market index, which ranks country by economic freedom, all the socialist countries were at the top, and America's way below, way below, not marginally below, way below. And so you can see right here, top countries: Singapore and Switzerland and Ireland. And we know what they're doing right now. We've heard, if you're paying attention to the news, you know what they're doing. They're lowering taxes, they're getting rid of capital gains taxes, corporate taxes, all that stuff. And now look at them, they're blowing up. Sweden's number 10, Denmark's number 2, Netherlands number 8. So there they are, top 10, right? Now check this out. So here's the United States. Where are we? 25. 25. We're not even in the top 10. We're not even in the top 20. 25. Now, this is kind of interesting, the regional ranking. Canada, Chile, United States, Uruguay. That's interesting. Anyway, now, let's do a little comparison between United States and Sweden. Check this out. Overall score, marginally different, for the last few years. And then the last 2 years, Sweden just dominated the U.S. Kind of marginal. But 7 points out of 100 is not nothing. And look where it was. Look where it was during that period they were talking about, the 90s, and then, of course, they have to get over that hangover. It takes a long time. Just every decade, narrowing the gap every decade. And then finally, we had convergence. And then now in the last 2 years, they're starting to diverge in the above of the United States. We're going the wrong way. Now, this is overall, but let's start breaking this down. Check this out. Property rights, again, converged and then exceeded. Look at that. Judicial effectiveness, not even close in 2023. Not even close. Of course, look at the downward trend of the United States. We're not free. We're not a free country. Government integrity. I laugh that there was ever a period where these two were the same, apparently in 1996. But ever since then, Sweden is just dominating the United States in terms of government integrity. Tax burden. Tax burden. Look at this. The United States has a higher tax burden. Oh, wait, no. Am I reading that right? Am I getting that backwards? Okay, yeah. Okay, sorry. I'm getting that backwards. Obviously, Sweden has a higher tax burden. They do pay exorbitant taxes. This was something that the Swedes did confirm with me when I was talking with them a lot. Sales tax is 25%. Income tax is 25%. Massive taxes going on. But again, they still have choice. So when they choose what school to go to, when they spend their public school money, their tax money on the education, they get to choose where to go, and they can take that voucher to a private entity. Okay, and the same thing with healthcare. They get to choose where they take their free healthcare money. They get to choose where to go. They have choice. They have economic choice in that. They pay high taxes. But this is what's interesting about the taxes. Number one, in Sweden, last I heard about this from my Swede friend, which was a decade ago. When you advertise a price of a product, the tax must be baked into that price. The tax must be already included in there. So when you see the price on the shelf and then you go to the register, you pay what the price exactly that it says on the shelf. There's no price hike at the moment that you go to the register. So when the Swedes were buying stuff here in the U.S., they were always so confused with the fact that on the shelf it would say $7.99, but then when they got to the register, it was like $8.34 or whatever. And they were so confused, like, what's going on? And so, I had to constantly explain that to them. Additionally, the other thing they didn't understand was tipping. They were like, and I think this is kind of common with a lot of other countries out there, European countries. They were like, tipping? What? Don't they get paid enough? It's like, no, they don't. Actually, you need to tip them. So that was always interesting. Government spending. So again, now, so the United States ranks higher in terms of government spending. I don't buy that. But what I'm noticing is that there is a trend, a convergence trend over the last two or three decades. So it'll be interesting to see how that might converge moving forward, or maybe not. I don't know. Fiscal health. Look at that. Fiscal health. They are fiscally responsible. The United States isn't even close to fiscally responsible. We're at zero. We're at zero 2022 and 2023. And by the way, I'll point out the fact that Sweden did not lock down during COVID. They didn't lock down at all, not once. And neither did Japan, by the way. Zero. 2022, 2023, the United States. Zero. Or I'm sorry, 0.1. Business freedom. Business freedom. Business freedom. Labor freedom. Interesting. Labor freedom. Okay. I wonder how they come up with those numbers. That's surprising. All right, monetary freedom. Monetary freedom. Yeah, not surprising. Once again. So anyway, that's Sweden for you, ladies and gentlemen. That is Sweden for you. The Swedes are. It's not what you think. It's not a socialist paradise. It is a hybrid. They have some socialist. Socialist isn't even the right word. The government does not own any means of production. The government does not provide any services directly. They don't even have a government-run post service. It's 100% privatized in Sweden. There's no Swedish post service that's owned and operated and run by the government. It's 100%. It's 100% private. Okay, and with the school systems, it's about 50% public and 50% private. They found, by the way, that that public schools in the vicinity of private schools improved when they implemented the voucher system and allowed parents to take their dollars, their tax dollars, to other schools. Not only did the private schools offer better outcomes, but then the public schools had to start competing with that, and they improved. Their outcomes improved because of it. Man, free market competition is a good thing. It's always a good thing. And Sweden is a perfect example of that. So if you're one of those people who thinks like socialism is good and the socialism's the answer, no, you're wrong. You are wrong. Look at Sweden more deeply. Look at countries that have toyed with socialism. Look at Cuba, look at Venezuela, look at all these socialist countries. It always goes in the way of corruption. Always. You cannot trust people. That's why the founding fathers wrote the document that they did. It's because you cannot trust humans with power, and there has to be checks and balances on power. Socialism doesn't do that. It simply doesn't do that. The other problem is, the big problem with any kind of socialist, communist sort of ideology or structure, economic structure, it reduces freedom. It eliminates choice. You know why? Because you have to implement these things that you want, socialist wise, communist wise, by one means and one means only. Force. You have to force people to do it, because no one will ever voluntarily do these things. They will never do it, because they would rather transact with who they want to transact with. They'd rather interact economically with whomever they want to interact. And when you force them to make choices that they don't want to make, it's you have eliminated their freedom. Okay, so the moment you do that, it's no longer America. It's no longer the American experiment. It's no longer the constitutional republic. It has gone to a completely dark place. Personally, I believe we're already there, but more specifically for this video, I want to stay on topic with Sweden as the example of why it doesn't work. They figured it out, and they figured out what does work. Well functioning. That was the key term. Well functioning free market capitalism. Increase the choice, increase the options, increase the freedom and the liberty. Let people do what they want, so long as they are not violating on the rights of anybody else. Of course, we're all adults here. Don't fall for the ridiculous arguments, the extremist arguments. You know, it's so easy to see once you realize, especially after COVID. How do you go through COVID and not realize that the answer is freedom? The answer is the individual's right and ability to make choices best for themselves, best for their family, and best for their community. And some federal authority, even state authority, does not have the right, should not. I'm going to make a normative statement here. Should not have the right or ability to step in and make those choices for you. No, we got to get the hell away from that. It's doing nothing but causing more problems for this country. That's basically going to be a lot of what I'll discuss in these other videos. So if you like what I'm talking about, or hell, even if you don't like what I'm talking about, tell me why. Give me a reason why. Comment below. I don't know, make a video and tag me. Explain to me why I'm wrong. Explain to me, show me the data, show me the proof, whatever it is. I'm here to learn too. I'm not perfect and I don't know everything, but man, I learned a lot over the last few years. I really stuck my head into some data, into some books and videos explaining to things that I didn't understand, explaining perspectives and belief systems and ideologies that I'd never been exposed to before. And actually, I had been operating under the belief that they were totally wrong. And then I came to realize, oh shit, they actually have a lot of facts and data on their side. They actually know what they're talking about. So anyway, thanks for hanging out. This is Corner Culture. Catch you later.